Hello, everybody. Simon Dixon here. It's a Sunday in sunny Miami right now, and I've been on a bit of a road show in the US. I'm just headed from Miami to New York, then I'm heading over to San Francisco and finally Cancun for the Satoshi Roundtable before leaving the South America region. I haven't been live for ages. I thought to myself this morning that I'd better go live. I don't have the correct setup. I'm just holding up my phone. Excuse it if it's shaky, but I thought to myself, better to go live than not live at all. Today, I want to talk to you about three Bitcoin fundamentals because it looks like we are in a shifting market. And I would like to share with you three supply shocks that I think everyone should be aware of as we start to analyze where we go next in Bitcoin. Again, this shouldn't be used as financial advice. I'm not giving calls or directions or anything, but three things that you should be aware of. So I've just come from the Miami North American Bitcoin Conference. I'm on the banktothefuture.com roadshow. We were making some important announcements. You can see the live recording on the banktothefuture.com YouTube channel to get updates on that. But today I want to talk about Bitcoin and the three supply shocks that are coming up. So the first thing is if you returned from your holiday season and you haven't really caught up with everything, there's obviously this whole Craig Wright scenario. The interesting thing about this Craig Wright scenario is essentially there is a supply shock coming up that everyone needs to be aware of. And due to the fact that either Craig Wright has committed fraud or defrauded the people, or he genuinely is going to show what he has. In a nutshell, I don't want to, I've just been following the headlines myself, but the TLDR is that Craig Wright claims to hold part of what would be the 1.1 million Bitcoins. And apparently they were the missing pieces to unlock those were held in something called the Tulip Trust. And the Tulip Trust is due to send Craig Wright the missing parts. And then there's been some debate about it. He keeps doubling down. And, I'm sure we're going to get another excuse or story that's just going to keep this story going on forever. But the interesting thing is that the court said that Craig Wright has until the 1st of February to release details proving that he owns those keys because he's in a court battle with David Kleiman, who has, well, not David Kleiman, sorry, he's passed away, unfortunately, and his family are trying to argue for half the estate based upon the fact that they claim that Craig Wright and David Kleiman were business partners in a mining operation that mined approximately 1 million Bitcoins or more. Round about the early inception of Bitcoin. So the interesting thing is that if Craig Wright, is Satoshi, as he says, then he should own those keys. And he's constantly said that. And he went out on the BBC a long time ago when he first came on the scene and said that. But he hasn't been able to deliver the goods and given all sorts of excuses and haven't followed the case enough to know the intricacies of forged documents and all sorts of stuff. You'd have to really follow it deeply. But here's the point. The point is that there is due to be a resolution in February or an excuse to push his can down a little bit further, kick the can down the road a little bit further. But it's all come to this situation where it's going to resolve itself around about February. And one or two things are going to actually happen. Either Craig Wright's going to come out with a bunch of excuses and can't move the coins. And I think really, this is one of the final. There'll always be the Bitcoin SV believers that will continue to follow Craig Wright and as a disciple and come up with all sorts of reasons. But we get to really see this, and there's two kind of scenarios that can happen here. Either those keys are completely locked and Craig Wright can't produce them, in which case it's highly likely that David Kleiman and maybe Hal Finney and others that speculate that have passed away are Satoshi Group. And it means that the coins probably cannot be moved, which means that 1.1 million Bitcoin is speculatively removed from the supply. What am I doing there? I'm not sure if the internet's giving us a bad time here, but we'll carry on and I'll see how it goes. But 1.1 million Bitcoin could be speculatively removed from the supply. And I think that can create a pump leading up to the second and third supply shocks that people should be aware of. And that would be a contraction of the supply. The other thing is that Satoshi can move those. He can prove that, or Craig Wright can move those and can prove that he has those, in which case half would go to if they win the case, half would go to Dave Kleiman's estate, and half Satoshi, and Satoshi would then, if he could prove that he was Satoshi at that point, Craig Wright would then have to he's claimed, Craig Wright, that he'd obviously sell those. So that would be a huge supply shock. My guess is that he's he's unable to move those, but either way, there's going to be, I believe, a price reaction as a result of these events, because it's either going to be a significant contraction in the supply or a significant increase in the supply. So, if you believe that Craig Wright is Satoshi, then you should probably, and don't take this as financial advice, be selling your Bitcoin in order to buy it back cheaper, because my anticipation would be a huge crash in the price. If you're like me and believe that that's not going to happen, then I imagine after this unfolds, you're going to see a bit of a pump in the price, as well as people realize that 1.1 million Bitcoin is highly unlikely to be moved. I guess Craig Wright just has to keep going on and try and get people to listen to him a little bit further and come up with more and more excuses to keep the story alive, so that Bitcoin SV can continue. And essentially, Bitcoin SV is just becoming a prediction market for the likelihood that Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto. And people can speculate on that by buying and selling Bitcoin SV, which you got to give it to him. If this is all a fraud, he's essentially managed to create a top 5 cryptocurrency and pull in a load of suckers and disciples. But we'll see where that goes. So anyway, that's the first supply shock you need to be aware of. The second supply shock is keep an eye on the Ponzi scheme. So the Plus token Ponzi scheme was probably responsible for the last pump in Bitcoin, where it went from approximately $3,000 to $14,000, in order for a bunch of scammers that defrauded the public of approximately $4 billion worth of Bitcoin. And they were manipulating the market in order to offload their position. But I think that is all unwinding. And remember, there's two kind of big supply shocks of sellers. It's the Plus token Ponzi scheme, which own approximately 1% of all the Bitcoin, and whatever's left of the Mt. Gox trustee as well, to try and dump on the supply. But the interesting thing about 2020 is that a lot of these supply shocks are coming to an end. We're going to know what's going to happen, hopefully, with the Mt. Gox trustee Bitcoins. We're going to know what's going to happen, probably, with the Plus token Ponzi scheme Bitcoins. And Craig Wright is either going to be proven to be a fraudster or just lose a lot of credibility. So that's also a supply shock. And of course, the third supply shock that I'm sure everyone is aware of is that 2020 is the year of Bitcoin halving. That means that the number of Bitcoins that miners receive every 10 minutes cuts in half. I have been through 2 halving events, and I have no reason to believe that this will be any different. Obviously, market is different, where the whole world knows about Bitcoin. That's different from the previous 2. And there's a lot more liquidity and people involved in that than the previous 2. But the reality is a lot of the world may not necessarily know about Bitcoin halving, and that may or may not be factored into the market. But the reality is that when Bitcoin has been in a 2-year bear market, miners have to sell all of their Bitcoins in order to try and pay their electricity costs and hardware costs and not shut down their machines. So that brings a big supply. I've got a train here. It was really interesting in Miami. I saw on the train here a really clever marketing campaign for Bitcoin, and it had across the side of the train, ready for Plan B with the Bitcoin B logo, which I thought was fantastic marketing. Brilliant to see out here in Miami. But anyway, the halving is there, and if we start to get an increase in the price, I'm not sure if my internet's connecting, but if not, I'll try and do this again on the other side of the plane in New York, where the weather will be a lot colder, I hear. And yes, the miners, if the price increases, then they can hold on to more of their Bitcoin, or if and they will have less of them to sell. So that really changes the economics of Bitcoin. It might be factored into the price, but it still has this effect on the exchanges as a result of miners not having to sell so many Bitcoins in order to keep up their operational costs. So to summarize, just in case you caught the video late, you can go back and repeat. There are three major supply shocks in Bitcoin that are going to change the fundamentals and economics alongside you watching the technicals to make 2020 a completely interesting year. I also believe that there are several trends that are also going to change the market, and I'll cover those in future videos, like security tokens, DeFi, CeFi solutions, and all sorts of interesting things that are happening in the market right now. We are what might be at the end of 2 years of building and really taking out a lot of the sellers, a lot of the people that were here for the quick profits, a lot of the people that were never meant to be here in the first place until later, until Bitcoin has more utility for the masses as opposed to those that were just trying to make a quick buck. And a lot of building has happened. A lot has happened in terms of scalability, improvements in all sorts of levels, improvements in the ecosystem. The Miami North American Bitcoin conference was quieter than ever at the same time as Bitcoin having so many interesting factors, which all points to me that a lot of the dumpers are out of the market, and the hodlers of last resort, as Trace Mayer would say, are all kicking in right now, and we have these three really interesting supply shocks and more financial innovation than we have ever seen as we enter into 2020. I continue to say 2020 is going to be a really interesting year, and I am really sorry that I haven't been able to share this journey more. But if you're happy to put up with my amateur videos, what I found is I tend to procrastinate in creating them if I have to get the correct stand and get the sound set up correctly. But if you bear with me with my shaky camera and the ability to do a bit of an amateur, I've got my team here. I'll try and do better and make them higher production. But I come from the thought that it's better to have some content in an unprofessional, amateur manner than no content at all. So let me know what you think. Leave comments below. I'll try and make sure that the internet's better in the next place I give an update from. Tell me what you'd like me to cover in the next video. Tell me what you'd like to see. I'm on a bit of a roadshow right now, meeting many of the institutional investors in crypto, seeing what pulse, what they're investing in, and I'll report back, and hopefully this all worked okay. Otherwise, I'll try and do it again. Thank you for your time. See you later.